one universal God, creator and sustainer, uphold all civil servants. May they serve with integrity and compassion, without justice or partiality, to better their communities and the nation. Give us grace to do your will, all what we undertake.
O God, the fountain of all wisdom, enlighten by your Holy Spirit all teachers and educators. Give them a spirit of grace and compassion, that they may have the strength and endurance to instill the love of God, new discovery, and the pursuit of wisdom in those they teach. Give us grace to do your will in all that we undertake.
That our works may find favor in your sight.
God of help and hope, surround your loving care all first responders, police, firefighters, emergency medical technicians, and all healthcare workers who devote their lives to helping others. Grant them courage when afraid and strength when weary, that they may serve you and their neighbor. Give us grace to do your will in all things.
That our works may find favor in your sight.
Give to all the people of our land, O God, the desire to serve you in their life's work and vocation. May your presence be manifest in all that we say and do. Weave together the work of every hand and the commitment of every heart.
Nobody in there.
For we recognize our interdependence, our responsibilities to one another, and the mutuality of our destiny.
Amen.
A reading from the Gospel according to St. Matthew. Jesus said, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the wind blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them would be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. Rain fell and floods came, and winds beat against that house and it fell. And great was its fall. Now when Jesus had finished saying these things, crowds were astounded at his teaching, for he had taught them as one that had authority and not as the scribes.
Like peekaboo, peekaboo. Oh, there we go. Welcome back. Well, baby. Oh, I got thumbs up. See, that's what for the moment, I'm gonna let them keep popping and out. Where are you though? Oh, there's gotta be something. Thank God.
Donald Trump sworn in as the 47th president in the United States wasted no time signing dozens of executive orders. We saw this guy a lot during political season. Oakland University political science professor Dave Julia. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming in. We're excited to pick your brain. First of all, just what are your thoughts as to what you saw? Not so much with the inauguration, but what happened after that with all these executive orders being signed.
And can I add to that? Does it usually get that length of coverage?
Oh, the inauguration?
Yeah.
I think in these
All
circumstances, yes.
Okay.
Right. I mean, we can't forget that we saw history yesterday on multiple fronts. Right. We've got a guy who's been convicted of a number of felonies, take the oath of office. He's also the first guy since the 1890s to serve non-consecutive terms as president. All the pomp and circumstance, multiple speeches. Right. There was a lot to cover yesterday, including some of that substantive
and
stuff.
The peaceful transfer of power, which
Absolutely.
we missed out on 4 years ago.
It's great for the country to see that, right?
Yeah.
And to respect it and honor it. I think it was a good day for the country.
The executive orders, anything jump out to you? I know the pardons, the January 6th pardons are getting the one that's getting a lot of news.
There was a stack of them too, man. There was a lot of them.
There's a lot of everything yesterday, right? I mean, 1,500 pardons, plus the ones that President Biden issued with literally minutes to go in his term. I think the one thing about the executive orders, and they're not all executive orders. Here we're getting in the weeds a little bit.
Executive action.
Some are executive action, executive memoranda, right? And they all have different purposes. They all have different things that they can do and sort of how far they can take policy. I think the big part of that was, number one, the volume of them. I don't think we've ever seen a day one list of executive actions that long. Number two, Trump, he told us what he was going to do. And this is him following through, right? He said he was going to do stuff on the border and on the economy and on energy. And there it was.
You say executive action. What are the differences between the things that actually happen?
Sure. Well, there's executive orders that, and they're all constitutional powers that the president has, right? Executive orders hold the weight of law, but they're only done by the president.
Right.
Importantly, they cannot contradict existing law that has been passed by Congress and signed by the president.
Right.
Executive memoranda, other executive actions are basically telling his department heads, his cabinet secretaries, I want you to do this. I want you to consider this part of this law and execute it this way.
Hey, Dave, let me ask you about the volume of executive, we'll just call them for lack of better, executive orders that we saw yesterday. Is part of this because this is the first non-consecutive term we've seen? This is a guy who's, I think the first time he signed one executive order on day one. It's such a different office. When you come into it, you don't know what to expect. He knows what to expect. So he had everything in order, ready to go?
I think there's definitely a little bit of that. And I think you can see Trump's experience as well as his team's experience much more this time around than in 2017. And I think that does have an effect. I also think that it's because the president is, and this is not just Trump, but over decades, the presidency has accumulated power and has frankly, in many respects, gone beyond what the framers wanted. And you're going to see this this time around as well. Many of these executive orders are going to be challenged in court, and I would bet some of them are going to lose.
What does he do? So from a political standpoint, because I think, and this is according to the polling, I think that people who voted for him were uncomfortable with January 6th. Does that strike you as odd that he chose to make that such a day one maneuver, all those pardons, when he really campaigned on bringing down prices at the grocery store? And of course, the border was another big issue.
I'm not. I think that he also talked a lot about it with his base, right? And it's something that they wanted to see. I also think, given that he can't serve another term, and he's not going to run again, frees him up to do some things that maybe somebody who was going to be in a position to try and seek another term wouldn't do. Right. And because it's going to be politically not maybe damaging, but it's not the best thing politically to go out and pardon 1,500 people that most Americans would say, I'm not sure I'm with that.
And you can't take that one back. I mean, you can't challenge that in court. I mean,
that is one of those presidential powers that is absolute, no questions asked.
Yeah.
What do you think we look for now in the first 100 days? Because he is moving quickly, and as Ryan points out, he's had the job before. So certainly you bring to that office all this knowledge of how to get things done. And he's also working up against a clock before the midterms.
Well, for sure. And it's amazing that we're already going to talk about 2026, but that's part of the conversation, right? And I think this flurry of executive actions, you'll probably see more. I think he's going to try to work with Congress, but given the thin majorities in both the House and the Senate, that's going to be really difficult. So I think much of the stuff that Trump will be able to do will have to come through those executive orders.
And all the young people watching us, they just care about TikTok. Just as long as they can have their TikTok.
Yeah, does TikTok get sold to an American conglomerate?
Your guess is as good as mine. But I would say this, right? This is one of those executive orders that's probably going to be challenged in court. Yeah. The president can't simply ignore a law that's on the books.
There you go. Work to change it.
We'll see.
Very much so.
We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, Dave.
Welcome back. House Speaker Mike Johnson still planning to include a debt limit increase in the reconciliation package, but claims he's not, quote, wed to it. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, meanwhile, said that he's expecting Republicans will not tackle the debt ceiling in that bill. Likely it will be in March up against the continuing resolution there. Yesterday, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise laid out a timeline for a vote on one reconciliation package full of President Trump's priorities. Watch.
The budget will come through in February. In March, you'll see that work being done in the committees. Obviously, the Ways and Means Committee is going to play a primary role, but other committees will as well. And then we'll bring that bill to the floor in April. This bill, one big beautiful bill, as President Trump calls it, It's going to be a great exercise in democracy because you're going to be able to see it play out through the committees, ultimately on the House floor in April. We're going to move aggressively because the American people can't afford to wait. They're hungry for the kind of reforms that we're about to deliver.
And joining me now is Missouri Congressman, Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Jason Smith. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for being here this morning.
It's great to be with you, Maria.
So this planned reconciliation schedule would put one bill on Trump's desk by Memorial Day. You've been calling for this the entire time. You said it should be one bill because you want to ensure that the tax extensions get done in time. But can you do it all in one package? Can you put border, defense, tax extensions, as well as energy permitting and spending cuts in one bill, and possibly the debt ceiling lift?
We absolutely can. This is the quickest and best approach to get as much of President Trump's priorities and the American people's priorities in one bill. It may take a little bit longer, but we can all get the job done by Memorial Day, get this on the president's desk and get it signed into law. It will be so important to the American people. The tax uncertainty that Americans are facing, 26 million small businesses are facing because they could have a 43.4% tax rate next year. We have to give them certainty now.
Well, I mean, I had Mike Lawler on Sunday, New York congressman, and I said to him, will you still vote for the tax extensions if SALT is not in there? He said no. He says, I'm not going to vote for the tax extensions if I do not get the state and local tax deduction lifted up from 10,000. And you say?
You know, this has been a sticking point for a long time, and we know that 10,000 is not an acceptable number for our colleagues from New York, New Jersey, and California. We've been working with them. We're continuing to work with them, and we will find a good balance. We're threading that needle, but without a doubt, it's not going to be 10,000. It's going to be more, but we have to find what is that good point that helps their constituents in New Jersey, New York, and also California.
Well, I mean, Senator Lindsey Graham said, why am I subsidizing New York? We have low taxes in South Carolina. Why do I need to subsidize New York, which has out of control taxes, which many New Yorkers, including myself, agree with these sky-high taxes? What is it going to be? I mean, Mike Lawler threw out the number 60,000. Would you vote for 60,000 on lifting the SALT to 60?
So, Maria, I'm not going to give a number, but if you just talk about the average SALT deduction in my home state, it's $1,200. So I'm from the same camp that Lindsey Graham is in, but what we have to do is deliver on President Trump's priorities. That's why we need one big, beautiful bill, because everyone's going to have to give and take, Maria, and that's what we're going to do. It's going to have to be a balance. Lindsey Graham's going to have to give. Jason Smith's going to have to give. Mike Lawler is going to have to give, and we will deliver for the American people because failure is not an option.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good strategy to make sure that everybody's on board by putting it all in one bill. Jonathan Fahey, jump in.
Yeah, Congressman Smith, in addition to the SALT deduction or anything else within the bill, is there any hope with these margins so small in the House and in the Senate of being able to get a few Democrats on board to maybe make up for if you lose a Republican here or there? Are there any issues other than SALT that might entice some Democrats to vote for this bill?
Of course, we're focused on making sure that we have 218 Republicans to pass the bill in the House of Representatives.
All right, Doge co-founder Vivek Ramaswamy will no longer head the department, leaving Elon Musk as the sole chair. Edward Lawrence joins us live from the White House with more. Edward, what's the backstory?
Yeah, so he's stepping away possibly for future endeavors, and I'll get to that in just a second. Elon Musk was spotted here on the White House complex yesterday, and noticeably absent was his Doge duo brother, Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, a Trump transition spokesperson says that Vivek has stepped away from the Department of Government Efficiency because he's possibly going to run for the governor of Ohio. Now, on social media, Vivek says this. He says, quote, it was my honor to help support the creation of Doge. I'm confident that Elon and the team will succeed in streamlining government. I'll have more to say soon about my future plans for Ohio. Last night, when President Trump signed the executive order creating Doge, he was asked about the world's richest person getting an office in the West Wing.
This is an order creating and implementing the Department of Governmental Efficiency, known as Doge.
Okay, that's a big one.
Is Elon Musk going to get a West Wing office?
No, he's getting an office for about 20 people that we're hiring to make sure that these get implemented.
So Doge now is off the ground and started running with those 20 folks that are here on the complex. And we'll have to see what day 2 of the Trump administration has to offer. And I can tell you that the lights are on in the residence right now. They were on when I got here at 5:30. Back to you guys.
All right, Edward, thanks so much.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
President Trump following through on his promise to make border security a priority, taking plenty of steps to stop the migrant crisis.
This is actually an executive order designating the cartels and other organizations to be foreign terrorist organizations.
That's a big one.
Sir, this next order relates to the definition of birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment of the United States.
Good. That's a good one. Birthright. That's a big one.
Sir, this is a proclamation declaring a national emergency at the southern border of the United States.
That's a big one. A lot of big ones, huh?
A lot of big ones. Former DHS Deputy Assistant Secretary, former acting ICE Director, and former federal prosecutor Jonathan Fahey joins me now. Jonathan, let's focus on the one that I'm particularly interested in, cartels. What effect does it have on these cartels, calling them foreign terrorist organizations from a legal perspective?
Well, I think what it mostly is going to do is saying anyone, meaning banks and other things that are doing business with these cartels and cartel members will be prohibited from doing so, which will make it harder for the cartels to conduct their business if they're not able to conduct banking and other things like that. It also sends I think most importantly, it sends a strong message to these cartels, to Mexico, that we are done, we are taking them seriously, that their reign on the southern border is over. And so I think those are the two most important things, is restrict access to funds and just show the ultimate seriousness of President Trump on this issue.
When Trump orders the, quote, clarification of the military's role in border security, how do you expect that to play out, Jonathan?
It's going to play out a couple of ways. I think what people were talking about beforehand is the military going to be involved in policing and things like that. It doesn't seem to be. It seems to be they're probably going to be on their southern border as a deterrent. They're also going to do things like build, with the national emergency, build the border wall, which will, prevent people from coming, also create a deterrent. So those are the types of things I think the military will be most used for on this, will be along the southern border, and also building barriers, building structures to prevent people from coming in.
But Jonathan, not everybody is on board the Trump train. Immigration groups are suing the Trump administration over its move to end birthright citizenship. The lawsuit filed states, quote, by attempting to limit the right to birthright citizenship, the order exceeds the president's authority and runs afoul of the Constitution and federal statute. So, Jonathan, how can Trump's order overcome that?
Yeah, this is going to be immediately challenged in the courts, and two important things. And this has been discussed a lot, and Senator Mike Lee has discussed this issue quite a bit. But basically, birthright citizen means if you're a natural born citizen subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So Trump's order is basically saying if you're not here legally to begin with, you and your offspring aren't subject to jurisdiction of the United States. But this will immediately be challenged. But it's still an important win for Trump on a couple of fronts. One, again, it reemphasizes the seriousness he is on this issue, that you're not going to game the system by coming in here, and if you have a child, then the child gets to stay, and then thereby you get to stay and almost most circumstances. So it creates a seriousness, the deterrence on the issue. Also, to provide the court's ability to provide clarity on the issue. The courts need to weigh in on this, and the courts may come back and say this is a role that Congress needs to define what it means to be subject to the jurisdiction of the court, or they might outright rule in Trump's favor, or they might outright rule against him. But I think it demands clarity. But either way, it's an important win for the Trump administration, just to show we're done on these issues of just letting anyone game the system.
That's important. And there's a disincentivizing effect, one, and finally getting some clarity in the courts, too. Finally, the Senate passes the Laken Riley Act, bipartisan support. 64-35 was the vote. How big a game changer is this, Jonathan, in the fight against illegal migrant crime?
This is a huge game changer on two fronts. One, it means anyone arrested of a theft-related offense, not convicted, but arrested, has to be detained by ICE and thereby deported. This really was something that was more catered towards the Biden administration, who was letting everyone else go. The Trump administration isn't inclined to let people go, but this means going forward, hey, if you're here illegally and commit a crime, you're detained and you're going to be removed. So this will keep people safer, and this would have saved Laken Riley's life if this was in effect, as well as other things of the Biden administration they were doing differently would have saved her life too. The other thing, again, it's the same. It shows how important security is, public safety is, putting the American citizens ahead of the interests of illegal aliens. But the final thing that's quite important, it really shows a split in the Democratic Party. I think about a third of the Democratic senators voted for this bill. You wouldn't have seen this even 6 months or a year ago. So it does show that this issue has gotten to the Democrats, that they're thinking about it. And there's clearly a split in the party on this. And is this a trend going really tougher on immigration, or is this going to sway back the other way once Trump gets in office? But it really does show that that case woke Americans up like no others to the horrors of illegal immigration and to not enforcing the law. But I think it will ultimately be a positive effect, protects the American public, which is the most important thing the government can be doing.
And Americans voted accordingly. Jonathan Fahey, thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm Steve Doocy. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
So thank you all for coming. We'll take a couple of questions. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
President, thank you. Wanted to touch on the world on fire that you mentioned, but let's start, if we could, with your references to Greenland and the Panama Canal, so forth. Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
And can you tell us a little bit about what your plan is? Are you going to negotiate a new treaty? Are you going to ask the Canadians to hold the vote? What is the strategy?
Yeah, I can't assure you, you're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this, we need them for economic security. The Panama Canal was built for our military. I'm not going to commit to that now. It might be that you'll have to do something. Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. And they've abused it. They've abused that gift. It should have never been made, by the way. Giving the Panama Canal is why Jimmy Carter lost the election, in my opinion, more so maybe than the hostages. The hostages were a big deal. But if you remember, and nobody wants to talk about the Panama Canal now because, it's inappropriate, I guess, but because it's a bad part of the Carter legacy. But he was a good man. Look, he was a good man. I knew him a little bit, and he was a very fine person, but that was a big mistake. Giving the Panama Canal to Panama was a very big mistake. We lost 38,000 people. It cost us the equivalent of $1 trillion, maybe more than that. Probably the most expensive, they say it was the most expensive structure, if we call it a structure, which I guess you can, ever built. And giving that away was a horrible thing. And I believe that's why Jimmy Carter lost the election, even more so than the hostages. Those two things.
Follow up on Ukraine and Iran, the two negotiations you'll be heading into. On Ukraine, you said just before, it's a lot more complicated now.
Much more complicated.
Do you believe?
Because it would have never started.
Right, but it has started. You've
Well,
got,
not only started, the cities are largely knocked down.
so
they're
you've
they're
got
like,
what you've got. At this point, to hold on to leverage in dealing with President Putin, would you make a commitment to the Ukrainians that you will keep supporting them during the negotiations?
well, I wouldn't tell you if that were
And
the
would you
case.
make a commitment to provide a security guarantee if they do enter into a armistice or a ceasefire along the lines that the French and the Germans?
So, a big part of the problem was Russia for many, many years, long before Putin said you could never have NATO involved with Ukraine. Now, they've said that. That's been like written in stone. And somewhere along the line, Biden said, no, they should be able to join NATO. Well, then Russia has somebody right on their doorstep, and I could understand their feeling about that. But there were a lot of mistakes made in that negotiation. And when I heard the way that Biden was negotiating, I said, you're going to end up in a war. And it turned out to be a very bad war. And it could escalate. That war could escalate to be much worse than it is right now.
Because they can never join NATO.
Well, my view is that it was always understood. In fact, I believe that they had a deal, and then Biden broke it. They had a deal, which would have been a satisfactory deal to Ukraine and everybody else, but that Biden said, no, you have to be able to join NATO. And that's always been, and nobody knows more about NATO than I. Years ago, when I first started this, I didn't know too much about NATO, but I got it right anyway. I said, they're taking advantage. I'm the one that got, and the Secretary General was here, as you know, 2 weeks ago, saying that if it weren't for me, NATO wouldn't even exist right now, because I raised from countries that weren't paying their bills. At that time, 28 countries, 20 of them were not paying their bills, 21 to be exact. They weren't paying, or they were paying a very small portion. And I raised over $680 billion. That was the number he gave, by saying, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. And as soon as I said that, the money came pouring in. But Obama could have said it. Other people could have said it. Bush could have said it. Nobody said it but me. I took a lot of heat. They said, oh, that's a threatening statement. Well, they weren't paying their bills. I said, we're not going to protect you if you're not paying the bills. So in a true sense, I saved NATO, but NATO's taken advantage of us. And one of the problems that I have, and I've said it openly, I said it to President Zelensky, Europe is in for a tiny fraction of the money that we're in. Now, whether you like that situation or not, Europe is much more affected than the United States. We have a thing called the ocean in between us, right? Why are we in for billions and billions of dollars more money than Europe? And, they're a similar size, a little smaller, but they're a similar size economy as the United States when you add them up. And yet Europe is in for a small fraction of the number the United States is in. Now, Biden could have called them up during the term. That's what I did. I said, you have to pay your bills. And they all, one stood up. I won't say who, you'll probably have it, because the papers, the media hated to report on it. But a prime minister stood up from a country, a famous meeting of 28 nations with no press, no anybody in the room. He stood up, he says, does that mean if we don't pay our bill, and at that point it was 2%, it should be 5%. It should be 5%, not 2%. But at that point it was 2%, but many people didn't pay. Some people didn't pay anything. But many people were way, including Germany. Germany was at less than 1%. Well, I think NATO should have 5%. Yeah. Well, you can't do it at 2%. I mean, at 2%, every country, if you're going to have a country in a regular military, you're at 4%. I think they should be, they're in dangerous territory. I think it should be, they can all afford it, but they should be at 5%, not 2%. I'm the one that got them to pay 2%. But a gentleman stood up, a prime minister stood up, and he said to me, sir, could I ask you a question? You're saying we have to pay our bills. If we don't pay our bills, will the United States protect us from Russia? I said, if you don't pay, you mean you're delinquent? He said, yes. He said, if you're delinquent, we will not protect you. I took a lot of heat. Although it was somewhat closed door, I took a lot of heat from the media. And you know what happened? The money started pouring in. That's why NATO has money. And the Secretary General said it was the most incredible thing he had ever seen in a negotiation. Now, if I would have said, yes, we will, nobody would have paid. If I would have loved to say, yes, we'll protect you even if you don't pay. But that's not the way life works.
Two questions related to each other. First, you said on your first day of office, you're going to pardon January 6 defendants. Are you planning to pardon those who were charged with violent offenses?
Well, we're looking at it, and we have other people in there. And as you see, I guess 24 or 28 people came now from the FBI. That came out very quietly. Nobody reported it, but they had people in some form related to the FBI. They had 4 or 5 people that were strongly related to the FBI. We have to find out about that. We have to find out about Hezbollah. We have to find out about who exactly was in that whole thing, because people that did some bad things were not prosecuted. You know, I see it all the time, and you see it too. People that were doing some bad things weren't prosecuted, and people that didn't even walk into the building are in jail right now. So we'll be looking at the whole thing, but I'll be making major pardons. Yes, please.
Sorry, just one more follow-up.
Please.
On Jack Smith's report.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. It's good to see you again. 2 questions about Syria and the ongoing war in Gaza. About Syria, the Pentagon disclosed last month the U.S. has some 2,000 troops in Syria. That's almost double the number initially we were told of 900. Will you keep that troop capacity the same upon taking?
Well, I won't tell you that because that's part of a military strategy, but I will say it was Turkey. Turkey's been after that country in different names and different forms and shapes for 2,000 years. Those people that went in are from Turkey. And President Erdogan is a friend of mine. He's a guy I like, respect. I think he respects me also. He's the one that didn't go after certain people after I requested that he not. You know who I'm talking about, the Kurds. I don't know how long that's going to, because they're natural enemies. They hate each other. But he didn't do that yet. And he didn't do it in the past also. He started and I said, please don't do that. And he didn't do it. So, but if you look at what happened with Syria, Russia was weakened. Iran was weakened. And he's a very smart guy. And he sent his people in there through different forms and different names. And they went in and they took over. And that's the way it is.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. Do you have concerns about HTS taking control of
By the way, I
Syria?
have the envoy here. Is that in the back? Standing with my son, Eric, is Steve Woodcoff, who's just got back from the Middle East, and he's done a fantastic job. He's a great deal maker. I said, what we need there is a deal maker, because nobody makes a deal. We have people that understand where the rivers are and where the meets and bounds are, but they can't talk. They can't make deals. Steve's done a great job. I just want to thank you, Steve. You've been working endlessly for months, and he's working specifically on the hostages, trying to get them back.
My second question is,
Steve, come up for a second. Maybe you might want to say a couple of words.
Sir,
I didn't
another hostage.
know Steve was going to be here, actually.
Neither did I.
He's done a fantastic job, and it's a dangerous job, too, and we appreciate it. He didn't know about this kind of danger and the other deal making he does. Now he sees a lot of big danger. Come on up, Steve.
Mr. President, can I ask you the second part of that? Hamas
Yeah, just one
released another
second,
hostage
please.
video.
I'm going to give you a little report on the hostages, if I can. Steve? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wow. Well, I think we're making a lot of progress, and I don't want to say too much because I think they're doing a really good job back in Doha. I'm leaving tomorrow back to go to Doha, but I think that we've had
May they have skills, talents, and knowledge, and sweet success in all that they do. May they have joy and happiness and abundance. May all beautiful, great, and noble virtues of generosity, love, kindness, compassion, patience, fortitude, tolerance, forgiveness, honesty, courage, strength, energy, resolution, determination, resilience, perseverance, consideration, humility, generosity, gratitude, contentment, composure, serenity, understanding, and equanimity be theirs. May they attain full wisdom and liberation.
Oh God, you have bound us together in a common life. Help us in the midst of our struggles for justice and truth to confront one another without hatred or bitterness. and to work together with mutual forbearance and respect. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This is my
Nobody's getting through. Got some heavy duty stuff. Why would you put another piece of that square boardwalk over there of steel? Why would you just do it with the rocks? Where it's easy to cut. I just super out. No, it's filled with concrete. Okay. I ain't mad about it. Yeah. Nah, not fucking around. really tapping on it like it's really going to settle it. Alright, well, that's just that for the update, y'all. Glad appreciate anybody popping in. A couple more likes we got. First one, we get a second one play around. Do it again later. Y'all hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, follow. We'll have all kinds of content coming. We'll have everything cryptocurrency to follow up on. But now, follow through with the things that he said that he's going to make happen.